Hello, welcome back to I Got Board Game. And today I have a review of just a trashy game, a real trashy game. And that's Garbage Day. I don't know what you guys are thinking when I described it as trashy. Anyways, Garbage Day is a simple dexterity game, dexterity stacking game, if you will, published by Mayday Games back in 2016. And either in maybe 2015, 2016 is when it was on Kickstarter. And so that's when I backed it and was able to get this limited edition version of it, which is in this silver colored trash can container. And actually, let me see if I can show. It even has, might be too shiny, but it has the name of the game here embossed here, fancy. Still plastic, but just silver colored. The retail version you would see at stores, like game stores now, would be an opaque green. So that's the standard retail version. And so, as I mentioned, it is a dexterity stacking game. I guess the closest comparison people might know is Jenga, which is interesting because I feel like I've been making a lot of Jenga comparisons recently. But the game plays 2 to 5 players. I think it goes up to 6 with expansion packs, and it plays in 30 minutes, which that's what it says on the box. And I would say that's kind of accurate for the couple times I've played it way back then. Just might be a little long for a game of this type. But before saying any more, I will get into explaining how the game plays. And since it is a simple dexterity game, I can maybe go through all the rules. And so I'll have to do it through showing 2 images actually that I could find. So here is how the game goes. The main component is the box container itself, which you'll actually be using in the game. You'll open it, take the lid, put it on top upside down. And you'll put this in the center of the table. And that's kind of where all these trash cards that come with the game will be stacked. You also give each player a room card. On the normal side, there's 2 sides. There's one regular side and a busted side. So you'll put it on the regular side in front of you, face up. And the whole idea of the game is you're kind of competing against your opponents who are your roommates to avoid being the one who has to take out the trash. And that's kind of gross. But the way it works then as a game is on a player's turn, players are going to go clockwise in turn order and go through 4 steps, 4 simple steps. So during setup, each player will be dealt 3 trash cards. And so the first step of your turn is just to draw up to 3 if you don't already have 3 cards. The second step is to play a card. And so when you play a card, cards will have symbols in the top corners indicating where you could choose to play it. And it's essentially this red symbol, meaning you can play it to an opponent's room, which is the idea of you're trying to hide the trash in your roommate's room, which sounds gross. This light blue symbol, meaning you could play it on top of the trash can. Basically, you're throwing it into the trash. And this darker blue symbol, meaning you could keep it in your own room, like you found somewhere to hide it in your own room. And then after you play the card, certain cards might even have additional effects that you can choose whether they activate or not. You'll then go on to checking your room because, let me go to the next image. This is kind of what it'll look like. You have your room card. Once you get to the third step of checking your room, any cards you ended up playing into your room or have had from other turns, other people putting it in your room, the cards have these values on them. And basically when you're checking your room, if these values add up to 10 or more, you basically have to clean your room. So I think the idea is basically how dirty or how much of garbage you have in your room. Eventually at some point you actually have to then throw it out into the trash. And so that's when these values add up to 10 or more. Then you have to start stacking them one at a time onto the trash can in the center. And I'll get back to how to do that. Then the last step is to check your overflow, because basically as trash is being stacked into the center, if you ended up knocking over any of the trash, having it fall off the trash can onto the table, you collect into your overflow. And depending on the number of players shown here, if you ever have a certain number of trash cards in your overflow, you are busted and eliminated from the game. And so going back to the trash can, which will be in the center, it is as I mentioned, it's a dexterity stacking game. So when you have to put trash onto the trash can, there's just basically very simple rules you have to do. You have to use one hand. You have to put the card on top, like you can't slide it in from the side or something, but you put on top of other trash. And the main rule is that these cards all have 2 holes near the top of the card. And so when you're stacking the cards onto the trash can, those 2 holes have to be unblocked, basically clear, and you can see through them to the table. And so those are basically the rules for stacking. And so that's why the cards end up being spread out in this shape and not just, stacked on each other like a deck of cards. So you have to follow all those rules when stacking. And like I said, if when you put a card, you knock over any trash cards, you collect those into your overflow. And then if your turn, you have to check if you have a certain number of cards in your overflow. That'll determine if you're eliminated. And so players will keep going through these 4 steps: drawing, playing, checking their room, checking their overflow, until there's just one player left, basically the one player who isn't eliminated from having too much overflow garbage. And that one player is the winner. So that is how you play Garbage Day. And so to get into my pros of the game, the good parts of the game, the first thing I would say is the production, the design actually of the component itself. I thought it was really clever. I mean, that's why it got my attention when I first saw it on Kickstarter. Admittedly, that was when I was first getting into Kickstarter. So it was, I was still new to games and seeing what people are putting on Kickstarter as kind of unique ideas. And so I would say this caught my attention because it's a trash can shaped game for a game about taking out the trash. So that was like, oh, that's clever. Never seen anything like that. And then obviously like limited edition kind of caught my eye too. It's like, ooh, I can get this silver retro old school looking kind of trash can for a game. The other idea was how the stacking was done. I think it's kind of clever because if you just hear that you're stacking cards in the game, you might just think, okay, I'm gonna put one card and then another, and then basically just end up with a whole deck of cards stacked somewhere, maybe on top of the trash cans. Like, how is this gonna fall over? But the most clever part of it is what I mentioned in the rules, is that the cards, for example, this cardboard tube has these 2 holes in it. And every card basically has these 2 holes. And so then it puts a special rule on how you have to stack it on the trash can, where you can't just put one card on top straight up on another one, but you have to do it so that the new card that you put on top has the holes still open and they see through. And so that makes it take some skill, obviously harder as more cards are stacked up. And you'll even see on like Board Game Geek how it can look if you're playing with people who are very careful about it. You really kind of get this flower shape out of these cards that expand quite a bit before obviously it collapses and all the cards around it just fall. And so that's kind of what I experienced those couple times I played it. And I was like, whoa, this is cool physics, basically. And you get to see how far it goes before it actually all collapsed. And so that was kind of a cool part to see when I played it. And then the last pro, I think, is just the theme itself. I mean, it's not a theme I care about. I think it's gross and trashy to be about taking out trash. But I was kind of impressed by, I had this whole deck of cards. I think this might contain some expansions. Like there's expansions like the dorm room expansion and I think the office expansion, basically all different cards that are basically items that you would find in those situations, those places. And so it's just kind of clever to see like how much they could come up with on these cards that fit the theme, right? You have chewed pencils and questionable nachos and what is this? chocolate milk powder, and it does look pretty gross, toilet paper, the way it's drawn, so that's also fitting. So it does a pretty good job of kind of just capturing the theme in its art and its cards, and obviously the trash can component. But now for the cons. I think the biggest con, not actually being the theme as something I don't care about, but I'd say the biggest con is the actual gameplay itself. Like I mentioned, it's a simple dexterity game, and I can be okay with those. I mean, I don't like Jenga. That might be too simple and abstract. But I have reviewed a couple dexterity games so far on this channel, which I think they work okay. You know, they play quickly. This game kind of being 30 minutes is too long for the kind of game that it is. You know, it's kind of the same feeling as Jenga, where it's like you're literally repeating the same kind of dexterity stacking action, and it takes a while for it to actually build up to the point when something exciting happens. And in this game, since there is a theme, it is kind of funny. Like you can kind of add your own banter to it, where it's like, oh, I'm giving like this dirty sock to you and putting it in your room. It's like, but that's only funny like the first time, I would say. Where then the actual gameplay is you're gonna just be going around gradually stacking cards, and it's gonna build up to that cool looking kind of flower shape on the trash can of cards, and then fall, and that person you know is eliminated because they just picked up like 10, 15 cards at once. And so I think that's kind of what hurts the game the most. It sounds clever an idea, but when you're playing it, it's all generally building up to just these few moments where you see the really cool display of trash on the trash can, and it falls. Like, oh, okay, I finally made it, fell, and I'm out of the game. And it's like, okay, that happens once for each other player, and then the last person standing just wins. And so that's kind of an unfortunate aspect of it. It just kind of takes too long and only builds up to these few moments. The other con is kind of with the theme, where it is taking out the trash, which I don't actually care about, even as well as it captures it in these cards, because it's also just more of the same, right? It's just the same, like same kinds of cards doing the same kind of actions, but just named differently. And so as clever as that can sound, it just gets repetitive, right? Like the cards don't really matter. You just kind of look at the value on it, and all the holes are in the same place. So you're just trying to stack them the same way each time. And so, yeah, I think that those are the main cons I have for the game. I do think a smaller con is also, even with the unique box shape and the mechanic of using the box, there are other games that do that, not that many, but that use the actual container or box of the game in the gameplay. And that's always kind of interesting to me. Like I mentioned, that's clever, but at the same time, it does give me some concern for how much you can keep playing the game, like especially if it's a box. This case, it's this plastic container, so it's more durable. But there is still always that concern of like, if you're producing a game that way, that plays that way, and it needs the game box, what happens if you buy it, have it shipped to you, and it's just like dented or damaged in some way? Like obviously you can go through the hassle of getting a replacement, but it's just the idea of like, if something happens to the box itself, that's gonna hamper your gameplay experience, or in some cases even just stop you from playing it, unless you use some other random box cover or box lid that you need for the game. And so that is a small concern with games that are designed this way. But aside from that, I do want to mention just one small pro, going back a little bit, is that the rules are written pretty well. And I do like how they even go to this step of including rules of like, oh, what if someone bumps the table on my turn and trash falls? Then it just clearly says, oh, the person who did it actually has to collect all that trash into their overflow. Or even it mentions the case where, oh, what if things just fall and it's no one's fault? You know, like a pet runs by your game or something, you know, like random things like that. Then it's like, oh, those cards stay down, and next time someone has to collect, they have to collect all those also. And so I do kind of just appreciate them including those small rules. And Also, the small rule that the first player is the person who most recently took out the garbage. I actually just enjoy those small first player rules that games include, like when they're unique about it and ties into their theme. I just think that it just shows they put in the little extra thought to do something like that. So those are just small extra little pros I want to mention because I think it's important to kind of point out when rules are written well and they're kind of to the point, and I think that's something that games can mess up on too. But this one does a good job of including even just small details of cases that might happen. And so with that, we will go into my rating of the game. And so let me share my Board Game Geek page. And so for Garbage Day, I give it a 4.5. So definitely down there. Even the average score is like a 6.1, which is, what does that mean? A 6 is okay, we'll play in the mood. So, I think there's probably casual gamers who maybe enjoy this, or people enjoy it with their kids. But for me, I give it a 4.5 because 5 is a take it or leave it line, where then I would kind of say, initially my reaction would be like, take it or leave it. You could find better dexterity games that don't take so long, that don't play so kind of repetitively without that many exciting points. But then a 4 is not so good, but could play in the mood. I mean, I wouldn't want to play it really. Like, I don't think I'll ever be in the mood to play it. Maybe try it one more time, but it is not. It is kind of pushing towards not so good because of the reasons I just mentioned, where it's repetitive, only builds up to a couple of exciting moments. Even though the theme is there, it's all kind of the same cards over and over, and there's really not much strategy thinking. Obviously, it's a dexterity game, so it's more about that part. Maybe there is some decision you can make of like when I should put the trash into my room versus opponent's room, or just put it on the trash can. But those are generally pretty simple choices, and those are maybe the only choices. So it comes down to really that stacking that's unique, which I don't think is enough to really carry the game. And so I would say, yeah, 4.5, little less than take it or leave it because it's not that good. But if you're curious, it is still a unique dexterity game, somewhat unique, still kind of comparable to stacking ones like Jenga, but somewhat unique that maybe you'd be interested in trying out. And so with that, that is my review of Garbage Day. And so if you found this helpful, I hope you'll share this review with your friends, family, people you want to play games with. And especially if it did still interest you, despite what I said, I would still say to try it out, right? It's something I tried out. I backed on Kickstarter, played it a couple times. And so it just gives you a different experience of what dexterity games could be like. And so with that, thank you for watching. And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.